Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to create this element right here. To do this, we are going to use Radix UI and Framer Motion. So let's create a new project and start a new project. Now that our project has been initialized, let's go into our project. Open the source directory and go to the app folder in the main page. Let's delete everything in the main tab and write our alright. GitHub Copilot is asking us to do something. Let's do that. That doesn't matter though. And let's start this app. This will start on port 3001 because we have our other project running on the port 3000. Now that we have our Next.js project initialized, let's add some dependencies. So while the dependencies are being installed, which they will in a while, let's create a new component. I'll call it dialog iOS. Now clearly, this component doesn't exist yet, so let's create it. RAFCE snippet. Now I want this to have a button first. Let's go to let's create a very basic button component. I'm going to copy it from the shadcn component. Let's just initialize the shadcn component library instead of setting everything up from this beginning. We can just do it using the CLI tool that shadcn provides us. Now this dialog iOS.tsx needs to be a client component because we can't use it because this whole thing is a server component and you can't use effect and other hooks over here. Now all of the primitive components of the Radix UI / React dialog are stored in this dialog component. Now we can go over to our main exported component and start writing dialog. Let's deal with the portal now. According to the Radix UI documentation, this is supposed to be the layout of the React dialog component. After the trigger comes the portal. Let's save it and check out our page. Nothing happens. An overlay should show up like the React dialog component, right? Like this. This thing should show up, but it's not. Let's work on the overlay first. That means the blackening of the back screen, the background. Let's go over here. Let's write some class names using the Tailwind CSS. And let's place these and BG black with opacity of 50%. Now let's go back to our component. And you will notice that our dialog box works. And now the overlay shows itself to us. Next, we must work on the content itself because the content is clearly not visible. First, let's add something to this. You will notice that these are still not visible. To make these visible, I'm going to add some classes to it that I've pre-written right here. I'm going to go to the content. I'm going to type CN, which is a class name. And I'm going to enter all of these. Now if I open the dialog, you will see a little box right here. Let's refresh the page. Now there are some classes that we need to remove from these. As you can see, now our dialog box opens up like this. Just like we wanted. But we don't want this dialog box to just appear out of nowhere. We want it to, well, slide in from the bottom, like the iOS door. Like this. So, you must go inside the content because this is the one with the background white and this is coming up right here. This is the box that is appearing out of nowhere right here. So, we must go inside this and inside let's add a motion div from Framer Motion. What I want is I want all of these classes and all of the props of the content dialog.content Radix UI component to be transferred to this component. Radix UI gives us a beautiful abstraction called asChild, which I've explained in my previous videos. Please do watch it. It's in explaining my favorite abstraction in Next.js or React. So now let's move on and let's see over here. Now according to this, asChild, all these class names should be transferred onto this div right here. And now we can do anything to this div. We can add animations to it. Initially, I want it to be all the way down. That means the y coordinate of this particular component will be the height of the screen right now, because I want it to be hidden at the bottom. So let's get the height of the screen as of now. We can do that using this snippet. In Next.js, you have to use this particular thing or else it throws an error. And when you animate it, y becomes 0. Let's see what happens. Alright, this seems fine, I guess. But I don't want it to be like this. I want it to be a little more decent, a little more graceful, like this. Let's do that. Let's add some transition to this, which is going to say, that looks way better. Overlay component is still just as stiff as it is not meant to be. I want it to be smooth. So let's go to the overlay, and inside the overlay, let's add a closing tag to the overlay tag. To copy all these attributes right from here because I have them. Now you might be wondering, where does this bg variable come from? First of all, let's forget about this and let's save it. Initially the opacity will be 0. When it animates, as in when it is rendered, it will be 1, and the exit will be 0. Again, let's try that. That doesn't work. So instead of this dialog overlay, I want all of its props to be passed on to this div right here, because this is the main div that we will be controlling right now. So if we change the background color to black and remove the tailwind class that was giving us the black component with the opacity of 50, we get this. But we don't want this to go all the way back there, right? We'll have to extract some value from the edge or the height variable. Let's come here and say that, first of all, the y variable that we want to use with frame of motion components will be a u motion value. After that, we must map the opacity to the height of the current component. So the thing is, when the y variable of this is 0, which is it right now, the y variable right here will be 0. I want this background to be at an opacity of maybe 0.6 or 60%. And when the y component of this particular component becomes equal to the height or the screen height of this window right here, which is right here, that's when it becomes the screen height. I want it to have an opacity of 0. So here's how you do that in Frame. And then we can use this opacity in our motion.div component over here, right here. But the opacity alone can't be given to the background color attribute, right? So we'll have to use a motion template, which is another thing that framing motion gives us to use with framer components. I'm sorry, I had this confused. I had this instead of this and this instead of this. When the y is 0, I want the opacity to be 0.6. And when the y equals to height, I want the opacity to become 0. That means when the y equals to 0 is right now. In this case, y shows up and it's 0. And when we exit the component, the y becomes height again because of this right here, and then the opacity must become 0. Alright, but there is another problem here. It is not exiting as smoothly as it is entering, and it's taking a lot of time to enter as well. I want it to be a little more snappy. Instead of 0.5, let's do 0.3. Yeah, that's way better. And now I want it to exit as well as it enters. Well, first of all, we'll have to take control of the entire component, and to do that, we'll have to use now, if I use effect again here, and I console.log and base it on the basis of open. So whenever open changes, it will console log open. Let's go to the console. and check out what's happening. Right now it's false. When I open the dialog, it becomes true. And when I exit, it becomes false. Now we have control of the state of the entire thing. So I want a smooth exit for this. To do that, we must use the animate presence frame of motion component. And since we are only showing the portal, we are only concerned with showing the animation for the portal. Let's wrap it and use the open state variable. If it is open, then show the dialog portal. If it is closed, then show none. Well, it still doesn't work because we haven't wrapped the entire thing in an animate presence. What animate presence does is whenever a new component is rendered under its component tree, that means if this dialog portal goes from nothing, null, to actually rendering and mounting a component in the DOM, in the virtual DOM, that means it will be rendered smoothly. It will be given a subtle animation. Let's see if that works. Well, that doesn't work either. The thing is that we can fix this by adding a little trick that Radix UI gives us in the portal, which is force mount. Now let's try it. That's good. But now it's animating. It's not just going out of existence without any animation at least. But we can also give it a custom animation and ask it to exit the way we want it to exit. Let's go over here. Exit. And the exit should be y equals string height. That's what should happen when it exits. Let's save it and let's see what happens now. That's too fast. Let's give our content some style. Let's change the y coordinate to y, which is the height of our screen basically. Means that we need 34 pixels of margin above it without covering the entire thing. So this is how that works. This component will be 34 pixels away from the top of the screen. Also, we should be able to drag this entire thing. So let's add a drag tag and make it so that we can only drag it in the y direction along the y coordinate. So right here, but this doesn't make a lot of sense, right? We can just lose it anytime and it just disappears. We can't do anything. We want it not to go anywhere. It should not exceed this right here. So we can give it a restraint. Let's enter a drag restraint, constraint, my bad. Let's add a top 34 restraint to it right here. So whenever we do that, it comes back to its original position. But it's too loose. I don't want this to be this loose. Let's go over to our drag constraints and add another attribute. Drag elastic is let's say 0.13. Yeah, that is way better. But the thing now is that there's some area, as you can see at the bottom, if you direct your attention to the bottom of the screen, it leaves some area right here. I want this to be white. So I can go to the padding bottom styling and add some padding. You can add as many as you want. So you can add 500 here too. And that won't make a difference because, well, it won't go that far anyway. Now we have this right here. But this does not close when we bring it right here. I want it to close. I want it to close if I move my cursor too fast when I'm holding on to it like this. I want it to close. Or if I cross 75% of my screen, if I move it to here at any speed, it doesn't matter. I want this to be closed. So frame of motion gives us another attribute right here on drag end, which takes in some attributes. It takes in over here we want to check if the y coordinate of the offset is greater than the height multiplied by 0.75, that is the 75%. The velocity is greater than 10. It works the best for me, so I'm going to use 10. And then we're going to set open to false, which means we're going to exit the screen. Let's try it. And that works. How beautiful is that? If we go on to more than 75% of the screen, it goes. And if I move my cursor too fast, it goes too. If I move my cursor too slow, it doesn't go anywhere, as you can see right here. But if I do it too fast, it goes away. How beautiful is that? But we also want, if we move it right here, I want it to snap back to its original position. I don't just want it to stay right here. So we have to put an else condition. If that is not true, we are going to use this right here, which I've found on the internet right here. This animate comes down frame of motion again. Now, if I do this, it will snap back to its original position using these particular animations, because the velocity is not as fast as I want it to be, and the Y offset is not as far as I want it to be. Now you might notice that my iOS dialog is starting to take some shape. And you can start writing anything in this particular section right here. So if I want an F4 tag, it will change it to this, and it's great. You can show options, you can show confirmations right here. On a phone, it looks even more natural because of the Apple style of animation. If you think that there's too little space right here between the top and the model itself, you can change it using this. Always you can do that. But then when you change this, you must change the drag restraints as well. And that's pretty much it. I hope you find this video a little bit helpful.